Good morning, all. Thank you, Kanan sir and Roshan sir, for excellent presentation. It made my job really easy. I think we have close to 1,200 participants who are watching that webinar right now. So my topic for presentation will be very short. I'm not going to go in all detail about management of arrhythmias in children. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bird's eye view of what we are going to manage. So yeah, let me start now. So if we are worried about arrhythmias in children, so arrhythmias in children, they present with symptoms like that can disrupt their daily activities. They can have dizziness or LOC. They can have ventricular dysfunction if it is an incessant arrhythmia. The most importantly, a lot of time the children, parents, and relatives are going to ask about activity, sports activity, particularly related to these children. Many pediatric arrhythmias, although they don't require any restrictions, most often the patient themselves, they know the symptoms which stimulates their arrhythmias or precipitates their arrhythmia. They self-restrict. They should know which symptoms should be worried or which symptom not to be worried. And more importantly, we know very well there are some arrhythmias and some conditions where sports may present a unique risk. Particularly swimming, we know long QT syndrome has been long been implicated to be a cause of sudden cardiac death in children who indulge in swimming. So the most important is you have to assess the patient for risk of collapse and sudden cardiac death. We should understand this is rare. This is a rare condition in children. Sometimes it's related to exertion. So we should be very careful in diagnosing this. While we talk about sudden cardiac death, we should know the facts. If you look at sudden arrhythmic death in children, if you take less than 1 year old, it's around 80 in 1 lakh. If it is more than 1 year old, it's 3 in 1 lakh. If it is 0.6 in high school students, if you see a high school students, it's around 0.6 in 1 lakh students. There is a conflicting data on athletes versus non-athletes. We don't have a great data. Most of the data I'm presenting is from United States. And most importantly, you should understand minority are arrhythmic. Not all sudden deaths in children are due to cardiac arrhythmias. So if you look at sudden arrhythmic death syndrome in total, around 350,000 arrhythmic sudden deaths per year happens in children in US. So around 4,000 people are less than 35-year-old. We can categorize young people. So when you should worry? So there are warning signs in children which you take it very seriously. Any syncope in a children, I recognize the atypical syncope because we know a lot of kids have a typical vasovagal syncope in school, standing in a pair for a long time, standing in a queue for a long time, and all that we see regularly. So if you leave out that syncopes, atypical syncopes, which gives you a suspicion of some serious underlying illness, you have to take it very seriously. Atypical seizures is one of the very common presentation in young kids and children. They are typical presentations. If you have atypical presentations of seizures, suddenly a kid comes to you, the parents say that every time kid does an exercise or plays in the ground, develops convulsions. This is not a typical convulsions you see in your clinical practice. When you have atypical seizures, you have to be very careful. As already Dr. John Roshan told you once, any concerning family history, you have to take it very seriously. If any family history of sudden cardiac death in children, young kids, in the family has to be taken in very seriously. All the cardiac arrhythmias which have a strong family history have very high risk of recurrence. You have to be cautious when a child talks about chest pain, when you see a harsh murmur or concerning clinical examination finding like a elevated JVP and signs of congestive heart failure in a children, you have to be careful. The patient has an arrhythmia with a known congenital heart disease, you have to be cautious because they can have a serious arrhythmias. When you can just relax when you have a palpitations or an arrhythmia, the kid complain of isolated palpitations without any coexisting symptoms. The palpitation lasts for a few seconds, few minutes. It's so short that they are not able to document any time. I always say most of my patients and relatives, the arrhythmia which comes and goes in so fast, it's unlikely to be pathological unless it's in the very early phase. Sometimes kids start having arrhythmias like this, slowly they become sustained. So you have a kid complaining of an isolated palpitation which is lasting for very few seconds. you may just reassure them after looking at other parameters. The kid does not have any family or personal history suggestive of any serious illness in the family, close family, and you find normal clinical examination. So these are the times when when a kid complains of palpitation, you can take it and assess in a relaxed way. Whenever a kid comes to your OPD, when you think about an arrhythmia, when they complain of palpitations at rest, when the palpitations start and stop, when a young patient complains of chest pain along with palpitations, you have, as I told you, that we see few faintings like vasovagal in kids. If you see any fainting which is atypical, that is, kid complains of a palpitation, syncope preceded by a palpitation, and palpitation happens without any warning. Palpitation precipitated by a mild exertion. You have a near drowning in a capable swimmer. The kid which is the swimmer by nature who swims regularly suddenly have a near drowning. So that is very uncommon for a capable swimmer. So you have to take it seriously. As I already told you, atypical seizures, typically not responsive to anti-epileptic medications. The epileptologist tells you that in spite of multiple hello, can you be able to see my slides?
Sir, we are seeing only the first slide, the hospital slide. We have not seen any other slide.
Okay. I'm not sure why I'm not moving my slides. Let me see. Can you see my slides moving now? Can you see my slides moving now?
Not moving.
No,
not
no,
moving.
sir. So you have to restart again. Just off it and again restart that.
I'll restart again. Okay. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, now it's moving.
Okay.
Yeah, it's moving now. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, I think had some problem with my slides. Hopefully, I think my audio was okay. So I'll go on with the further slides. So this was what I was talking about. Whenever you have an arrhythmia or palpitations at rest, sudden or stopping immediately, younger patient with chest pain, atypical faintings, syncope or pre-syncope preceded by palpitations, near drowning in a capable swimmer, and atypical seizures. These are the things we should be worried in the children and a possibility of an arrhythmia. Particularly, I was talking about convulsions, which are not responsive to anti-epileptic medications. This is very common. You may get a call from an epileptologist saying that this kid's coming with a recurrent seizures, but the kids seizures are not controlled by escalation of anti-epileptic medications. We have seen quite a number of kids in recent times, at least with long QT syndrome. Typically, a long QT syndrome, you know very well, it's a syndrome which you are most commonly going to see in children. They go to epileptologist. Sometimes there's no documented arrhythmia. I've seen one kid who had no documented arrhythmia, recurrent convulsions, was put on a video EEG. The video EEG has one ECG lead. So when the video EEG was recording a episode of convulsions, the ECG was showing a ventricular tachycardia, Tarsal 3 pointers. So whenever you have a kid which does not have any structural disease in the brain and has a convulsions not controlled by escalation of anti-epileptic therapy, you have to be very careful. You take a proper history and look into the ECG properly. And you have convulsions which are brought about by emotion and exertion. These are not very usual precipitants of convulsions. When you have a convulsions brought about by all this, you have to think about arrhythmias. And a child presents with a sudden cardiac arrest. You receive a kid with a subaortic sudden cardiac arrest, you have to think about arrhythmias. You have no obvious cause or known diagnosis. In a child who presented with sudden cardiac arrest, which has been revived, you have to think about a serious arrhythmias. You have a family member of the particular kid who has a pacemaker, ICD, or any cardiac interventions, or any documented malignant arrhythmias. Any family member with a sudden cardiac death at a younger age, less than 40 or 50, you have to take history of not only kids in the family who had a sudden cardiac death, you have to look at young adults in the family who have got a cardiac illness. You know very well that hypertrophic cardiomyopathy has a wide presentation when you look at the age. You may have a family member who had a sudden cardiac arrest with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy at the age of 25, 30, but a child may have got an aggressive form of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with ventricular arrhythmias at a younger age. So having a history of all family members is very important. So this is very important when you are looking at arrhythmias. This is why you are very much worried in kids with arrhythmias. In kids, we see channelopathies like long QT syndrome, Brugada syndrome, or CPVT. These are the arrhythmias have most common presentation during childhood. We see a lot of kids with long QTs nowadays being referred because a lot of pediatricians have been started picking up. Looking at a QT interval in any kid presenting with giddiness, dizziness, or syncope is very important. This is not a very rare disorder. If you have a large population like ours, there's a possibility that every pediatrician may see once in a while case of a long QT syndrome. So looking at a ECG is very important. You have arrhythmias which have a high ventricular arrhythmia risk, like cardiomyopathies like arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. They have very high chances of developing a ventricular arrhythmia. As I already told you, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So you have to be careful about these things when you are dealing with syncope in children. The rhythms we have already discussed by Dr. Kannan sir and Roshan sir about multiple cardiac rhythms. The rhythms which you have to be careful. You always worried when have a resuscitated cardiac arrest. You have a documented ventricular fibrillation. The baby or kid had a documented polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. ECG showed prolonged pauses with a baseline sinus bradycardia or AV blocks. You have to be cautious when you see a WBW syndrome. It has been amply explained by Dr. Roshan sir, the risk of sudden cardiac death in WBW syndrome. Any kid presenting with heart blocks, sinus pauses, slow supraventricular tachycardias, incessant arrhythmias, and ventricular tachycardias. These are the arrhythmias you have to be cautious. When you have most of the supraventricular tachycardias are hemodynamically stable, the kid reasonably tolerates most of the arrhythmias. We know most of these arrhythmias are not malignant. They can be managed either medically or by a curative way of radiofrequency ablation. You have a fascicular VT, which is very much treatable in children, and they usually don't cause any significant issues. We don't see a sudden cardiac death kind of a situation with these kind of ventricular tachycardias. Or isolated ventricular or atrial ectopics in a structurally normal heart, you need not worry much. And sinus tachycardias may be inappropriate. Sinus tachycardias, which are not very uncommon in children, you need not worry too much. So whenever you see an arrhythmia, there is a joint care between a pediatrician and a cardiologist or an electrophysiologist. The initial evaluation of an arrhythmia should include a 12-lead ECG. You cannot underestimate or underline importance of 12-lead ECG. Whenever you have an arrhythmia, having a 12-lead ECG is very important because you have to decide about further course of action, medications, and if the child needs a further intervention, and to prognostify the kids further prognosis to parents and relatives. Some kids may require extended Holters or loop recorders. You have to patiently wait. Always I say that whenever your child complains of palpitation which lasts for a few seconds, we need not worry too much until unless you have a high-risk signs, as I already told you in the previous slides. If you don't have any high-risk signs, you can wait. Most arrhythmias, if they are pathological, sooner or later, kid will develop a sustained arrhythmia. This sustained arrhythmia can be captured in an ECG. Most often we tell the parents, if the child complains of a few seconds of arrhythmia, don't worry, you don't rush to the hospital. If you're not able to record the ECG, fine. Sooner or later, she will or he will have a palpitation which lasts longer, where you can go and take an ECG and come back to me. So you have to patiently wait for the episode to be documented. Sometimes you require an additional testing. Most of the kids who complains of palpitations or arrhythmia require a basic echocardiogram to rule out any structural abnormalities. As already Dr. John Roshan told you that WW syndrome, you can do a stress testing to identify the refractory period of the pathway. You may require a cardiac MRI. You see nowadays we call structurally normal heart only after a cardiac MRI is normal, because there are some abnormalities like early ARVCs and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in early phases, or any infiltrative disorders can be missed in very early phase of illness. MRI picks up most of them. So most of the kids which have a suspicions for all these diseases can have a cardiac MRI. So you need most of the laboratory study. Some of them may require an EP study if you feel it's a life-threatening arrhythmia which has an excellent cure. So ultimately you end up in a treatment options. General treatment options will require simple observation. You have medications. Some kids or children, if they have a significant arrhythmia, may require a daily prophylactic or maintenance therapy. Or if the arrhythmias are rare and infrequent, you may suggest a pill-in-pocket therapy. We have antiarrhythmics or beta blockers which can be taken when the tachycardia comes in. We have drugs like flecainide which can be used as a pill-in-the-pocket therapy in infrequent and rare arrhythmias. Some kids, if they have a illness which can be completely cured and significant arrhythmia, you can suggest them a EP study and radiofrequency ablation. Bradyarrhythmias may require a permanent pacemaker implantation. A significant channelopathies like long QT or CPVD in a patients who are refractory to medical therapy or some form of long QTs like type 3 may require ICD as a primary therapy for prevention of sudden cardiac death. Surgical therapy is very uncommon, kids. Mostly it's a complex congenital heart disease situation where you may require surgical procedures in kids to take care of arrhythmias. I'll just touch upon few basic management protocols. Already has been few touched by Dr. John Roshan sir. In a AV nodal reentry or AV reentry due to pathways, always attempt a vagal maneuver in early phase. If unsuccessful, the most common drug we use in a pediatric age group is adenosine. You can use them as a 100 microgram per kg in a rapid bolus. You can increase the dose and repeat. Only contraindication I feel in a kid remains a active bronchospasm. So only if you have a history of acute bronchospasm, you consider not to give this drug. Otherwise, highly effective drug in children with hardly any hemodynamic issues. As told already, we can use synchronized cardioversion if your drugs are not working and kid is hemodynamically unstable. Usually for a supraventricular tachycardia, you require a lesser dosage. A 0.5 joules per kg should be good enough for converting a supraventricular tachycardia. If you have a pediatric paddles, good. If you don't have, you can try adult paddles itself, but you keep the energy at 0.5 joules per kg. Most of the places, as we have seen in previous slides or previous speakers have told you, like rather than going for a cardioversion, you can try intravenous amiodarone. If you have experience with trying amiodarone, you can try intravenous amiodarone in most of the SVTs also, because amiodarone has multiple actions. One of the earliest action amiodarone can have is a beta blocking action. So this beta blocking action can help you in terminating the tachycardia. So with the available drugs right now, we have adenosine is the safest. If you are done with adenosine, tachycardia is still not terminating, consider amiodarone. If amiodarone is not working, or if you have a kid with a hemodynamic instability, which is very unlikely in a AV nodal reentry, you can consider a cardioversion. The prognosis, the probability of complete resolution depends on age of onset. The majority of infants diagnosed up to 1 year of age have excellent prognosis. They may not see their arrhythmia at all. Close to 35 to 40% of them may not see arrhythmia at all. So if you have a kids which is more than 1 year at the first episode of SVT, there's a possibility that you may have to treat it, because complete resolution is not very common after 1 year of age. The maintenance therapy, you can use beta blockers in recurrent arrhythmias. Digoxin and calcium channel blockers you use only when you have when you see clearly that kid does not have a WW syndrome with a significant risk for atrial flutter or fibrillation. I usually avoid, if you have any documented white QRS tachycardia in a kid with WW syndrome, you have to better avoid these drugs, because they can block AV node and allow unhindered conduction of these signals into the ventricle, causing ventricular fibrillation. So sotalol, flecainide, amiodarone may be necessary in some patients with medical control of SVTs. I myself prefer, rather than starting this drug, consider radiofrequency ablation, because most of these antiarrhythmics have some side effects, and except for flecainide, which has been used extensively in children, other drugs have a long-term maintenance doses may have a toxic issues. So I prefer, if the kid is maintained by a beta blocker, I'm happy, I can prolong as much as possible. If beta blocker is not effective, or on beta blocker kid develops arrhythmias, I preferably take the kid for radiofrequency ablation. Ectopic atrial tachycardias, you know very well they poorly respond to adenosine and DC cardioversion until unless they have a re-entry as a mechanism, because DC cardioversion will not work on your automated tachycardias. The first line of management could be your antiarrhythmics like amiodarone. You can load them with 5 mg per kg bolus over 20 to 30 minutes. I prefer more than that. I usually give a bolus more than 1 hour. So give a bolus of amiodarone more than 1 hour, can be followed by amiodarone maintenance of 10 to 15 mg per kg per day. Minimally symptomatic patients may not require acute treatment. You can consider only a maintenance therapy. So one important thing in pediatric arrhythmias you should be aware of is tachycardiomyopathy. The incessant arrhythmias can produce ventricular dysfunction. Atrial tachycardias, if they present more than 90% of the time, they can have a ventricular dysfunction. We call it as a tachycardiomyopathy. If the PVCs or ventricular arrhythmias are present more than 24% of the time in total sinus rhythm, they can develop a ventricular dysfunction. With conversion to normal sinus rhythm, ventricular dysfunction completely improves. Kids can become completely normal. You can consider a electrical cardioversion in this kid. Some of them are hemodynamically unstable because of LV dysfunction. So you can consider electrical cardioversion. You can try medications like antiarrhythmics, or ablation is curative. So most of these ectopic atrial tachycardias are ventricular, usually fascicular VTs can present as a ventricular dysfunction and tachycardiomyopathy. The moment you ablate a ventricular arrhythmia or a arrhythmia which is causing tachycardiomyopathy, that LV function can improve. So in atrial tachycardias, close to 50% of the kids can have a complete resolution of arrhythmia. So children younger than 3 years of age have a higher incidence of ectopic tachycardia resolution versus the older children. The older children who had an onset of atrial arrhythmia after 3 years of age, as already told by John Roshan sir, atrial arrhythmias are not the most common arrhythmias in children. So if they have children with the atrial tachycardia which have onset after 3 years of age, there's a possibility that the kid may require a radiofrequency ablation. Pediatric ventricular tachycardias, you have to be careful about them. You have to be worried when it presents with syncope or near syncope, with a poor hemodynamic status, presence of congenital heart disease like tetralogy of Fowler, or complex ventricular anatomies, or cardiomyopathy and heart failure, presenting with myocarditis and ventricular arrhythmia. This is the dangerous subset. You have to be very careful, and concerning family history. If a family history of heart disease or sudden cardiac death. If unstable, a synchronized cardioversion at a dose of 2 joules per kg is very useful. You can increase the dose up to 4 to 5 joules per kg if it is not converted. If stable, you can consider using amiodarone bolus. Here, amiodarone bolus has to be given a little faster. I prefer at 30 to 60 minutes bolus followed by a maintenance therapy. Procainamide is not available in India, so I'm not going to talk about that. So, in ventricular tachycardia, hemodynamically unstable, cardioversion at 2 to 4 joules per kg. And if stable, you consider amiodarone. In structurally normal heart, ventricular tachycardias are well tolerated. Monomorphic ventricular tachycardias particularly well tolerated, minimally symptomatic. The patient can be closely followed with without a maintenance therapy. Beta blockers can reduce incidence. So if you have a symptomatic child, you can consider giving a beta blocker. Other diseases like channelopathies, lung QT or Brugada or CPVT presenting at ventricular tachycardias has to be treated according to the available guidelines. Most of them suggest beta blockers, and you can consider implantable cardioverter defibrillators in a symptomatic patients who are refractory to medical treatment. Long QT syndrome, as I already told you, the most common arrhythmia you see in long QT syndrome is a Torsades T-pointus. You will require emergent cardioversion. Some may recover with magnesium sulfate, and lignocaine may be useful. Increasing heart rate in long QT syndrome is always useful. When you have a long QT syndrome presenting with arrhythmia, one of the common intervention you can perform other than giving a cardioversion or a xylocaine is to increase the heart rate. Isoprolene can be useful. Isoprolene is usually a pro-arrhythmic drug. In this group of patients, by increasing the heart rate, it can be useful. So you can try that. If it is acquired long QT syndrome, you have to correct the underlying problem which has caused prolongation of QT. You bring out or pull out all the drugs which have caused QT prolongation. You find out all the drugs which can cause prolongation and pull them out of patient's treatment chart. So intravenous beta blockade may calm an adrenergic storm and help you to buy time. In the long term, beta blockers are very much useful. If they have a high risk features, may require a ICD.